Remember that your failure to be informed does not make me a wacko. Well, let's tie three things together here. Number one, Katie Couric getting caught with her hand in the cookie jar on her new documentary about the problem of guns here in this country. Number two, about a week or two ago, there was a story that former Facebook employees were saying the views of conservative posts had been suppressed or censored and those of less important liberal issues boosted. And then finally, the announcement this week that internet giants Facebook, Twitter, Google, and Microsoft pledged to tackle online hate speech in less than 24 hours as a part of a joint commitment with the European Union to combat the use of social media by terrorists. Let's tie all of this together. I'm sure by now you've been aware of the controversy that Katie Couric produced a new documentary about gun rights and the problems we have here in the United States, supposedly, with gun violence. The segment in this documentary, Under the Gun, shows nearly 10 seconds of silence after Katie Couric asked pro-gun activists how felons or terrorists could be prevented from purchasing a gun without background checks. So she asked the question, and all of a sudden there's this silence for over 10 seconds as they do multiple cutaways to the faces of the participants on the panel sitting there and staring. Now, these were shot at other times during the interview, and finally, 10 seconds later, you start to get some answers. Why did they do that? Well, at first, there was an effort to try to say this was a creative break. No, it wasn't. Let me explain why. I'm going to give you the benefit of 50 years of being in radio and television and having done a large amount of both video and audio editing in my career. The purpose of putting the break after the question was asked and before the participants answered was to make it look like this question was a stumper that they could not answer so that they would look stupid. That's why it was put there. If you wanted a break in there for effect or creative pause, where you would put it as when all the questions had been answered and before the next question was asked. She knew doggone well what they were doing here, and the fact that she's been flopping around ever since then trying to justify it, basically she's lying. What is the answer to something like that when someone says, if we can't do background checks in certain areas, how do we keep terrorists or gang members from getting guns? And the answer is, you don't. How well have we done in keeping people from getting cocaine or meth or other drugs on the streets of the country? And the answer is, we haven't been very good at all. Why not? Because, say, for example, the moment you prohibited all guns in the country, a vibrant black market in guns would erupt from Mexico, and we would see thousands of arms moving across our borders, just like the drugs do. No matter how much you try to block this in place, criminals will always be able to find a way on the street to get the weapons that they need. And even if you took all of those away, suddenly knife homicides became a serious issue. You see, our problem is a morality problem. And it started with the change in moral attitudes that we introduced in our public schools as part of the psychological experimentation that the educratic elites introduced in the 1960s. That's where you began to see morality, as we used to know it, fall apart in this country. If you look at the area where gun violence is the highest, you discover that it's an area where Democrats have been in control for decades and where the schools have been under the chokehold of the educratic elites and the National Education Association for decades, and where education has continuously declined. That's where the problem is. The problem is a problem of morality, not of guns. Let's move on.